In this video, we are going to go over how to factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. What does that mean? Well, it means that we've got trinomials of this kind of form here, where the leading coefficient, right, that number right out there, is invisible. It's a 1. And then we have coefficients here and here of any value that we want. If you haven't already watched the first video on this, my very previous video to this, please do so you understand the process I'm about to use. Otherwise, you'll be looking at this like, wait, why does this work? How does this work? So this is all about the practice of it, so you see me do many different kinds of problems. In this video, we're going to do 6. I'm going to follow that up with a second video after that with another 6. It's that important of a skill that I want you seeing tons of examples and getting tons of practice. Let's dive into it. So we've got two sides to this video. First side right here, m squared plus 9m plus 14. If you recall, and again, watch that first video if you haven't already, what we're looking for are numbers that multiply to 14, the factors of 14, that combine to add to 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out what is going on in my head. So I'm going to say factors of 14. I'll call that F14. Factors of 14. That's all that is. So the factors of 14, 1 goes into 14 times, and 2 goes into 14 7 times. Though 3 doesn't, 4 doesn't, 5 doesn't go into 14, neither does 6. 7 does, but that's just going to be 7 and 2, so we start repeating. And that's how we know to stop our list, when you start repeating factors in the opposite order. Okay, so now I'm looking at these factor pairs and I'm saying, which of these will add to 9? Well, 1 and 14, they can add to 15, or if I subtract them, get 13, so that's out. 2 and 7, if they're both positive, would get me 9, so that's in. So now we put out our parentheses, 1, 2, those are our two binomials, and I know that I have an m and an m here, because m times m is going to give me m squared. Now 2 and 7, let's test them out. Well, 2 plus 7 would give me 9, so they both have to be positive, and so we know that that is our answer. Now how do you check your answer? You FOIL. And if you're like, wait, what's foiling again? Check out my earlier videos on that. You've got to have it all down well to master this. And yes, it takes a little bit of time to do well at something. So take your time to look back at that. So I'm going to FOIL to check my answer. So to be very clear, this is my answer right here. We'll check it. If I multiply this out and I get back here, I found the correct factors, right? If I factor 16 into 8 and 2, I know that those are correct factors because 8 times 2 is 16. We're doing the check of the 8 times 2. M times m is m squared. M times 7, outer is 7m. I'm going to FOIL very quickly here. 2 times m is 2m, because by this point you should be rocking at foiling, and if you're not, again, watch those videos. 2 times 7 is 14. So m squared is what I have. 7m plus 2m is, oh yeah, 9m. There's the sum of those two factors, plus 14. So we got back where we started. We're right. Let's do a second problem here. Y squared minus 6y plus 9. We need factors of 9, things that multiply to 9, that add up to negative 6. So again, I'm going to put factors. I'll put fact 9. And now the factor's 9. 1 goes into 9 times. 2 doesn't go to 9. 3 does. 3 times 3. 4 doesn't, 5 doesn't, 6 doesn't, 7 doesn't, 8 doesn't go to 9. 9 goes into 9 one time, but that would be repeating. So we have all our factors. So now what I need to do is, very simply, line everything up. Right? I've got my two parentheses. You could start with this. I'll change up the order a little bit from what I did last time. I know I'm going to get y and y, right? That gives me y squared. Next, 1 and 9. Can they combine to give me negative 6? Not by adding them, that would give me some form of 10, and not by subtracting them, that would give me some form of 8. When I say some form, you could have a negative 8 or a negative 10 as well, depending on what you're doing, adding or subtracting. 3 plus 3 would give me 6, so I know they're 3's, but now you have to figure out the sign. If they're both positive, 3 plus 3 would give me positive 6. I need them both to be negative, so that when I add them, I get negative 6y. And that's our answer. You could also write your answer, by the way, some teachers might want it as y minus 3 times itself, y minus 3 squared. How do we check our answer? We FOIL. So that's our answer. We're correct, but I'm showing you how to check your answer by FOILing, and hopefully we get back to this. Y times y, that's the outer, is y squared. Y times negative 3, negative 3y. Inner, negative 3 times y, minus 3y. Oh yeah. Negative 3 times negative 3. Positive 9, and when we combine those like terms, y squared minus 6y plus 9, which is our original problem. Nice. All right, let's keep rocking and rolling. Let's do this one. Here, we've got factors of 11. Okay, so I'll do factors of 11. Well, what multiplies to give us 11? 1 and 11, and 11's prime. There are no other numbers that go into 11, so that's all we have to deal with, which, by the way, if this doesn't work, and if we were to run through a list of however many factors and none of them worked, that just means that that polynomial doesn't factor with integers. You'll see in later math classes that every polynomial can be factored, but you'd need some funky numbers to do that. That's way down the road. For now, in Algebra 1, if that's what you're doing this in, you're just looking for integers. So let's see, 1 and 11. Well, let's start with the x's, because x times x will give me x squared. I know that 1 subtracted from 11 gives me 10, so I know that subtracting them will work, but here's the thing, I need negative 10. So wouldn't I need the 11 to be negative? Right? Either do 1 minus 11 or negative 11 plus 1. That would get you what you need. So it's minus 11 plus 1. So you're playing math teacher here, coming up with those signs. And now from here, we'll check it. And this will be the last time I check in a video, because for the rest of the videos that I do this factoring in, you now know how to check. You FOIL. So all we're going to do is FOIL it out. X times x is x squared. X times negative 11 is minus 11x. Inner is 1 times x is x. And last is 1 times negative 11. If we combine all those terms, you get x squared. Minus 10x, negative 11 plus 1x. Minus 10, minus 11, which is what we started with. So we're good. Again, that's our answer. Awesome. On the flip side of the video, I'll have 3 more factoring problems for you with no checking, because now you know how to check by foiling, and it's just extra practice for you. And then later, another video on how to factor, but in that video, I'm going to show you how to do it a little more streamlined once you get really good at this process. And here we are on the flip side of the video with 3 more problems practicing you in the art of factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is 1. Let's dive into it. So where we left off, we were factoring, or finding the factors of this number to see what adds to that number right there. So let's list out the factors of 35. So I'll do factors of 35. So the factors of 35, well, 1 goes into 35. And then the only other numbers, well, 2 doesn't, 3 doesn't go into 35, 4 does not, 5 goes into 35, 7 times. 6 does not go into 35, and 7 does go into 35 5 times, but we start repeating just in the opposite order, so we know to stop our factor list. So now I want from these the 2 numbers that will combine to give us 12. Well, 1 and 35, if we add them, gives us 36. And if we subtract them, that gives us 34. So that's not it. 5 and 7, if I add them, give us 12. So let's see how that's going to be arranged. Well, we've got our 2 parentheses. You know it's g and g, because g times g gives you g squared. Now from here, I would need both of these 5 and 7 to be negative, because minus 5 plus minus 7 gives you negative 12. So each are going to be minus in sign. And that's it. As I promised in the start of the video, I am no longer going to be checking each of these problems. I'll do it out loud maybe like this, where you see that you get g squared. Outer is minus 7g, and inner minus 5g is negative 12g. Negative 5 times negative 7 is plus 35. I want you to keep checking your answers by foiling on every problem. I'm not going to do it on every one of these so that you're not watching 20-minute videos, all right? But keep checking until you get really good with factoring, because by learning how to go forwards and foiling like in your sleep, factoring becomes that much easier. Okay, let's keep rocking and rolling. T squared plus t minus 42. Looking at this, again, I need factors of 42, so I'm going to write those out. So factors 42. Well, let's see. 1 goes into 42 times. 2 actually goes into 42 21 times. And if you're unsure about some of these, because the number 42 is pretty big, use a calculator and just go through it and say, what's 42 divided by 2? It'll give you 21. What's 42 divided by 3? It'll give you 14. 42 divided by 4 will give you a decimal. So 4 does not go into 42. 5 doesn't. 6 goes into 42 7 times. 7 goes into 42 6 times. We stop our factor list because, again, now we've gotten to a point where we're repeating factors. We need, out of these factor pairs, numbers that will combine to give us 1, because that's the coefficient. When there's nothing there, technically it's a 1t. So we'll start out with our parentheses, our 2 binomials. We have t and t, again, because t times t is t squared. 1 and 42 won't combine to give you 1. Added together gives you 43. Subtracted will give you 41. 2 and 21 also won't work because 21 and 2 added is 23. Subtracted from each other is 19. 3 and 14 could add to give you 17 or subtract to give you 11. That's not giving you the one you want. 7 and 6, if subtracted, if one of them is negative, will give us positive 1. We would need 6 to be negative because negative 6 plus 7 would give us the positive 1 we want. Not only that, but we notice that if we multiply the negative 6 and the 7, it'll get us the negative 42, so it checks out. And again, FOIL to check. Last one in the video. It's been a long video, but I hope worthwhile for you because these are such important problems, and I've given you many different types to chew on. So now we've got x squared, and you know what? I'm going to change up this problem just a little bit. I'm going to make it minus 2, just for giggles. It'll still work. So x squared minus 2x minus 15, and we'll do factors of 15. Well, 1 goes into 15 15 times, and you might even be getting to the point where you're doing this mentally now. 2 goes into 15, none. 3 goes into 15 5 times. And then 5 goes into 15 3 times, but again, it starts the same exact factors, but reversed, so we're done with our factor list. Now looking at this, 1 plus 15 doesn't give us 2, nor does subtracting, it gives us 14 or 16. That's not negative 2. 3 plus 5 gives us 8, but if I have one of them be negative when we add them together, they'd subtract out to give us negative 2. So if 5 was negative, we'd get negative 5 plus 3 would give us the negative 2. So we got our two parentheses, x and x, that gives us x squared, and then you get minus 5 plus 3. And if you FOIL it out, you will see that you get that back. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15, added together, negative 2. That's it, peeps. A super, super important technique, factoring. Check as you're working through factoring until you get really good at it. Check by multiplying them. Take that extra time. I promise you it will pay you huge dividends. In a later video, I'm going to show you eventually where you need to get to mentally to do these problems quicker. So I won't go through the factor list like I did in this video, as, well, it's so important that I want to show you just how fast you need to be eventually. It's not to make you scared, but it's to show you eventually where you can get to. I'll see you there.